Hello, hello. I have amazing guest today. My guest is Ryan Holley. Ryan is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force and has led large teams in his earlier professional career. Today, he draws on both his formal studies and real life experiences to help people make sense of relationship pain and confusion. A lot of pain and confusion going on these days. He guides others in learning how to recognize what's truly theirs to carry and what belongs to someone else. Important distinction there. He helps people stop second guessing themselves and start trusting their own clarity. In his personal life, he's a devoted father to four young boys, and he enjoys boating, fishing, scuba diving, so it's safe to say he enjoys water.
Oh yeah,
Well,
born to be on the water.
Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so we connected on the socials and stuff. So you
Uh-huh.
do a lot of you have range. So I see you talk a lot about just glancing through some of your stuff, a lot of the anxious versus avoidant kind
Hmm.
of dichotomy and stuff. So is that a place you'd like to start, or kind of where do you kind of how do you like orient us a little bit, like how you got into this, and like yeah, just a little bit about beyond the intro that I just did, like kind
Yes.
of what yeah, a
Well,
little bit about how you got into all this fun mayhem.
well, real life experiences, personal experiences, combined with just a general fascination for psychology and how relationships work. Starting with my own desire, even from a young age, I was never a person that was naturally wired to want to date around. I always wanted to find a life partner. And my own early struggles, not knowing what I didn't know, and my partner selection, lack of boundaries, things along those kind of lines. Uh, Led me on a path to where it's like, okay, well, what really makes a healthy relationship? How does this work? What does this entail? And really just a deep dive that felt like a calling, ultimately did become a calling. And also the lucky fact that I have people that work in mental health and psychology in my family. So I had very amazing resources at my disposal that I probably could have leaned into earlier in my life, but when you're younger, you think you know it all, but then you come to find out you don't. But those great resources combined with a fascination for it, and I just felt this overwhelming call to make a career out of it, and I am grateful for that because I love what I do every single day. I love the fact that it can be something that can positively impact people, and it's just an area that I genuinely find fascinating, even in my own personal life. With my own significant other, we'll sit there just having long conversations about relationships, attachment, personality disorders. It's because it's just a fascinating thing, and it really just is something that I really genuinely, it's a topic I love, and I love to constantly discuss with others.
Well, sitting there discussing with your significant other, so there's we got the full spectrum, right? So you've had kind of experience on the dark side, some crash and burn relationships, but now
Mhm.
you're in a position where you can have these very candid conversations. Of course, everyone wants to be in a healthy, happy relationship. So I'm happy, from what I understand, that you're kind of in a good relationship now. At least what you just said, where you can have these interesting kind of let's put the cards on the table. Let's get into some of these. Whether it's attachment style, or,
Mhm.
because I think that's probably. I mean, you tell me, like, what does it take to pull off a healthy relationship? But I imagine being able to you dig into some of the mud a little bit, right?
Absolutely. Being able to dig into some of the mud is important to be able to have deep conversations with your significant other without walking on eggshells. Be your true authentic self. Accept the other person for who they are, but also being willing to own your own stuff, to own your side of the street and be able to say, hey, you know what? This is my issue and I take accountability for it rather than constantly finding a reason why it's not your fault. And that willingness to take accountability is profound. And it all that also helps you be able to really see the other person too. When you're willing to take your stuff, it just inherently grows empathy because you're relating to their shoes. Okay, how did my behavior impact you? It just ripples through everything, but it's really that core I see you, you see me, I care about your experience, you care about mine, and that really affects everything else.
That's hard to argue with. So how do people get there? Like how do people are they looking for someone early on to do that? Are they looking at themselves to sort of attract someone who's on that wavelength? Like, how do you get to that rarefied echelon of mutual accountability?
Well, it starts with the self-awareness of your own side of the street. And reality is that most people don't have that depth of self-awareness that they'd like to think they do. And and yeah, we being it's happened to me. I've been in relationships with people that I can confidently say are diagnosable narcissists, at least one. But okay, but what was my accountability, right? So why did I allow these behaviors? Where could I have done differently? Why was I blaming myself for behaviors that weren't mine? Where were the boundaries? And it's not about beating myself up, but it's about learning and growing because there's always a lesson to be had, even from the most toxic, abusive relationships. If we don't look at ourselves and we don't learn those lessons, we can be doomed to repeat these patterns again and again. You're never responsible for any mistreatment that another person inflicts upon you. You're not responsible for their abuse, for their neglect. But if you don't look at yourself, you might not learn how to navigate that, how to avoid it, how to weed out those kind of partners. Instead, choosing it over and over and over again because you're not doing the internal growth on your end.
Yeah, I totally agree. I say very similar things of like yeah, it's a delicate thing, right? Because it's like no one deserves to go through that kind of splash, but there all we can do is take accountability for ourselves and try to figure out like yeah I didn't want it, yeah I didn't deserve it, no but like how did you? That's why I'm fascinated like how people call in this stuff, especially consciously when they don't want to like I'm so tired, I don't want to date the same person, I don't want to. People consciously really want different than what actually happens. You often, unfortunately, as like a repeated pattern. Of course, we try to help people break free of that pattern, but yeah, what have you, whether in your own personal experience or working with your clients or whatever, like how do you, what's kind of the themes or patterns that you've seen kind of thematically that explain because I do think this is a huge other side of the coin of like yet people we talk a lot about the narcissist and this and that, but there's a to what you're getting is like, and this is where I try to shift the conversation with my clients of like, the huge other side of the coin is how did you create this reality as someone who consciously doesn't want. Nobody consciously wants to deal with the narcissist. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
so,
no.
yeah. So what's going on? How does this? Yeah.
Well, it all starts with attachment, and this is where attachment plays a significant role. Um, and attachment styles will affect how we show up in relationships. It'll affect the type of partner that we choose, the type of partner we're drawn to, the type of partner we commit to. And it really starts in childhood. Everybody is born with a temperament, and your temperament is relatively innate. And temperament can include things like extroverted, introverted, things like that. And that is actually separate from attachment because you can have a very extroverted, dismissive, avoidant. You can have an introverted, anxious attacher, vice versa. So that doesn't necessarily correlate to correlate to attachment, but you take your temperament and then you also factor in your childhood environment. Every child, regardless of whether they're growing up in an overall healthy environment or a not healthy, a toxic environment, will learn to adapt to best navigate that environment, to keep themselves in the best position possible, to give themselves the best possible outcome. And those learned behaviors of how to navigate your childhood combined with your temperament is how your attachment style is formed. And you have secure attachment, which is, the place that everybody wants to go. That's the place where you are really the healthiest version of yourself, or at least relatively so. You show up for yourself, you're emotionally available for your partner, you can show up for them. It's the really the healthy partner style. And then you have the insecure attachment styles. You have anxious preoccupied, which are the anxious attachers. Those are the people that really are on the side of I need to earn love, I need to hold on to it, I need to prove my worth, I need to prove to this person that I'm worth staying with. Then you have dismissive avoidance, which are on the other side of the spectrum, that they have a deep wound of shame. They fear intimacy. They fear being close. They feel that they are defective at their core. And if anybody gets too close to them, their partner's going to figure out that they're defective. So they keep everybody at an emotional distance to keep themselves safe. They want love, they want affection, but they feel unsafe with it. So their entire attachment style is actually based on avoiding confronting their own emotions and inner shame and avoiding exposing their inner shame to others. And then you have fearful avoidant, also known as anxious avoidant or disorganized attachment. They have both. They have both an anxious preoccupied and a dismissive avoidant attachment style, typically coming from very chaotic households or possibly even trauma and abuse. And they can really show up as an anxious in one relationship, as an avoidant in the other. There's a lot of variance there. But at the end of the day, insecure attachment, they're all people that want love, but don't necessarily have the complete tools to navigate a healthy relationship, hold boundaries, choose a healthy partner. And insecurely attached people are by far the most prone to getting sucked into a narcissistic relationship. All of the insecure attachment styles, anxious, fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant, are all prone towards narcissistic relationships and being on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse. And that's because with insecurity comes self-doubt. And a narcissistic person needs someone that has enough self-doubt to not trust their own judgment, trust their own feelings, and not hold boundaries. And attachment really does play a massive role because a person that's truly secure in themselves will hold boundaries, and a truly securely attached person is very unlikely to get sucked into a relationship with a narcissist or any similar type of abuser.
That was actually a very helpful breakdown. As a side note for anyone listening, there's millions of people. This is a huge topic online. There's a lot of online gurus and stuff, but that's part of the reason I'm doing this longer form content is to rope in people like Ryan that actually do have a handle on the subject. So thank you for that breakdown. I actually connected a few dots in my own brain listening to that. So I guess the logical, I mean, we could keep stewing in like how do you get so anxious or so this or that, but like I'm always trying to trend people up in a way. So obviously working with a great coach or whatnot, but just conversationally, like higher level, how can people start to think, or what can they start to do to even, they're like, oh my gosh, I identify as I'm disorganized, anxious, fearful. I'm every, adjective you can think of. So I don't even know, how do I dig out of this hole? Like, where do I even start? Like, how do you, like, what do people, how should people even think about that?
Well, first of all, it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to process for anybody. And one of the most important things to start off is instead of trying to, oh my God, I need to fix myself right now, take a deep breath, relax, and be kind to yourself. Be forgiving of yourself. Self-deprecation is one of the worst things that a person can do, beating themselves up. You got to practice self-empathy and really self-compassion. And doing that, that alone has an enormous impact on your attachment, your self-esteem, your self-worth, and your ability to do things like hold boundaries. So got to be nice to yourself. And there's a lot of different exercises out there that people can do to learn to really acknowledge and recognize their worth, their strong qualities, their good qualities, and minimize, not forget, because we're not trying to delude ourselves, but minimize the attention on the negative because the human mind tends to weigh heavy in negativity. I mean, statistically speaking, for example, if a person goes to a restaurant and they have a bad experience, they're 10 times more likely to write a negative online review than a positive one. People are more likely to complain. Well, guess what? When you're telling yourself negative things, those weigh more heavily in your brain. So you got to start rewriting the narrative with positivity, and I recommend at least 5 positive messages to yourself for every negative. There's a there's a significance to that number is typically 5 or more positives will outweigh emotionally a negative in your brain. So start off with self-compassion and then, start biting off piece by piece. And it's scientifically proven that a consistent change in behavior will result in a change in mood and emotions. They did a study on this back in the 70s, peer reviewed, scientifically proved. When it comes to attachment, if you do something different on the outside and you do it with repetition, you start to feel differently on the inside. In other words, fake it till you make it. So you start to do secure behaviors, and then the more you do those secure behaviors, the more you feel secure because you're rewriting the neural pathways in your brain. Because every message that we send ourselves, whether we realize it or not, every action we take sends ourselves a message, right? For example, if you're in a relationship and you're being mistreated and then you allow it, you don't hold a boundary, you're telling yourself, hey, it's okay to treat me this way. And I can't rely on myself to show up for myself. I don't have my own back. And it really will chip away at your self trust, your confidence. But when you hold a boundary and you say, hey, this doesn't work for me, this isn't okay, you're saying, my feelings matter, my needs matter. I can rely on myself and I can show up for myself. So those messages that we send to ourselves with repetition have an enormous impact on our attachment style. It is not rocket science to change your attachment style and become secure. It's not at all. It just requires self-awareness and the willpower to slow down and just be aware in the moment and do things differently and do them repetitively. And it's scientifically proven that you can change your attachment style at any age, even into your 90s. The brain has amazing neuroplasticity.
That's awesome. Yeah, and some people like the word boundaries is the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest without any gear. So
Yep.
how do people it's kind of like start where you can, or like find the just like lifting weights or whatever, any training like you got to my reflexive answer is like what's the smallest you can do that still builds whatever muscle you're trying to develop. Like that's kind of a hyper logical way of thinking about it. But how do you think about people who are their boundaries are getting blown out their entire life, and now you're telling them to assert boundaries? It's like you got to take them like 1 inch at a time sometimes, right?
Absolutely. It is it's an overwhelming thing to a person that's been trained, especially from childhood, that boundaries are unsafe. And so and boundaries are really a primary focus that I have with the majority of my coaching clients. And that's because it's really at the heart of it, right? Because a person that has, holds, and enforces boundaries is not going to find themselves in a long-term toxic relationship or an unhealthy relationship where their needs aren't getting met. It just won't happen because those boundaries will weed out people that are not showing up for them and mistreating them. And a healthy, emotionally available partner will be the one that'll last because they want to meet your boundaries. They want to show up for you. And so first it starts with an understanding of what boundaries are. Boundaries are not about controlling the other person. It's not an ultimatum. You're not demanding a behavioral change or something from the other person because you can't control anybody other than yourself. Boundaries are really about your limits of what you will allow and essentially what you will subject yourself to and what you won't. And a lot of it has to do with framing. For example, you better stop cheating. If you don't stop cheating on me, I'm going to leave. Well, that's trying to get the other person to do something. That's trying to control them. I mean, if they're cheating on you, you're probably not a great partner, but that's neither here nor there. You're trying to control them. The boundary would be if I continue to get cheated on, I'm going to have to remove myself from the relationship. I'm going to have to leave. See, the focus is on you and what you will allow. And when you're in a relationship, 9 out of 10 times enforcing a boundary is as simple as communicating, saying, hey, this is how I feel about this. This is what works for me. This is what doesn't work. These are my needs. And if you are in a relationship with a partner that is emotionally available, a partner that is empathetic to you, a partner that genuinely cares about you and your feelings, not just themselves, they're going to respect your boundaries. It's not about perfection. No one's perfect. We're all human. We have bad days. Even the best partner might step over a small boundary sometimes, but they'll take accountability, work to do better the next time. If a person gaslights you, if they try to get you to doubt your feelings, oh no, it's your boundary that's wrong, not their behavior. Or if they just ignore the boundary, or if they run away from the relationship, well, there's your answer. They were never going to show up for you. And you've just saved yourself time and emotional energy that you would have invested into a person that wasn't investing it into you. The analogy I like to use, if you are in a relationship with a partner that's emotionally unavailable, a partner that is mistreating you, you are not saving the relationship by not holding boundaries. You're essentially in a car that's heading towards a cliff. That's what you are. When you're in that kind of relationship, you're in a car heading towards a cliff. By not holding boundaries, you're not preventing the car from going over the cliff. You're just slowing down the speed of the car. So it's going to get to the cliff, but it's just going to take longer to get there. And when it gets there, it almost hurts more because you've spent more time and energy in that car rather than just getting there. And it's still a doomed relationship, but you're just prolonging it. And an important thing to understand is that most people, when they fail to hold boundaries, they do so out of fear. Fear is a powerful emotion, but it's also an irrational emotion. And the two major fears that motivate someone to not hold boundaries, one is the fear of conflict, fear of confrontation. If I hold my boundary, there's going to be an argument. They're going to get angry at me. The second fear, this is the big one for the more anxious attacher or maybe fearful avoidant that's in their anxious side. Fear, if I hold my boundary, I might lose them. They might leave. I might lose the relationship. Well, and this is what I tell people, if they leave because you have feelings, needs, boundaries, limits, they were never going to meet your expectations, and they were never truly concerned about showing up for you. Yes, it hurts, but better to find out now than find out 5 years down the road after you've given so much more of yourself to a person that's giving you breadcrumbs in return.
No, I'm glad that you kind of landed on the fear because that is, I think, just advice in general. Even if we like zoom way out of this conversation, there's advice. One of my favorite quotes is, "If information was all we needed, we'd all be billionaires with six packs," which is basically the guy I'm talking to. So it's like, there's advice. There's, oh yeah, I gotta do this. Oh yeah, boundaries, this, that. But yeah, what's the actual real bottom line, real thing going on? It's what's precluding you from insert do the advice, insert do the boundary. It's often fear. So I think that's a really smart place to. I just like this where this conversation's going because it's like we're trying to get to the heart of like what really stops people. That's what I try to figure out at least. It's like what's really stopping people. It's not that they don't intellectually understand boundaries and they need a lecture on boundaries. It's like how do we,
Right.
really empower people from the root, from the embodied, deeper place. Like you said, you can five positive messages for every negative message. I'm sure there's a lot of things you can do, but yeah, I mean, at least in my mind, at least being aware or somehow getting your arms around the fear and like what really is the concern. Like, okay, if they leave and sort of steel man argument the fear.
Mhm.
Oh, well, they might leave. I might be single for 6 months. I might like really steel man that fear so you can almost like exposure therapy get acclimated to the fear. Because if you can get over the reason why I'm hyper fixated on this, because if you can get over the fear, like you're gonna 10x things.
Absolutely. And the fear is a really, really big component. And sometimes people need to slow down and ask themselves, okay, I have this fear, but does this feeling make sense? Right? That question is an important question to ask sometimes, especially when there's any kind of trigger or any fear, like, I'm afraid to hold the boundary here. Does it make sense? Because when you're operating from that place of fear, the amygdala, the part of the brain that controls emotions, is on fire. But when you're asking yourself that question, when you slow down and say, does this feeling make sense? You're activating the prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of the brain. It's not that the fear and the emotions go away, but it's in a sense you're kind of zooming out, at least in the moment, to a 30,000-foot view. Okay, does this make sense? What am I actually afraid of? And okay, I'm afraid they might leave. Okay, what happens if they leave? Well, I won't be chasing their love anymore. I won't be constantly on eggshells. I won't be getting gaslit anymore. Sometimes the opportunity to zoom out and really just analyze it from that logical brain can really help too. But when people are so consumed in fear, they often don't even give themselves the chance to use that prefrontal cortex to look at the situation in a different light. So in general, when there's a trigger, that's one of my favorite things to have clients do is just, does this feeling make sense? Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it really doesn't. Fear is designed to keep us alive, right? You got a big angry tiger chasing you. Yeah, that fear will put you in survival mode. But sometimes fear only serves to torture us.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. So what? I'm just bouncing around, and as we do, uh, how do you what's your kind of approach? You talked about helping your people regain self-kindness, self-confidence, positive versus negative.
Mhm.
um talk about your philosophy, your approach, how you kind of work with people, or kind of what you, not necessarily like here's Ryan's pitch, but as another fellow, coach practitioner, I'm always interested in how people try to dismantle and work with some of these things. Because for me, I work a lot with the subconscious mind, because I think consciously people understand and do things. So
Yes.
I try to get more somatic, try to get subconscious. These are buzzwords at the level of a
Mhm.
podcast here, but I would love to hear
Mhm.
kind of how you think about it, or even how it's evolved over time based on efficacy rates, or just kind of what's your approach, philosophy, etc.
Well, I do try to really approach things from the subconscious because the subconscious really greatly impacts a lot of what we do and impacts how we feel in ways that we often don't understand. So, one of the things I really like to focus on clients with is almost like view it like a flow chart type, a viewpoint. So, this kind of trigger happens or this behavior happens, do this instead of that, right? And focusing on the change in behavior and focusing on it with consistency, change in behavior, change of thought patterns. Kind of a CBT approach. That consistent change in behavior and thoughts will reprogram the emotional mind, the subconscious. Because a lot of the subconscious stuff, it is really hard to just rationalize with. But the best way that you really work with that subconscious is by consistently sending it different messages through your actions. So it's holding a small boundary in a certain situation where you wouldn't otherwise, or maybe communicating directly a need that you would have otherwise suppressed. Or, okay, instead of getting emotionally dysregulated when you're triggered, saying, hey, I'm triggered, give me 30 minutes to regulate myself, and then we'll have a talk. Little differences done with consistency, it brings a big confidence boost. It is sending the subconscious different messages. You're feeling differently. You're showing up differently. And especially when I'm dealing with people that are more of a dismissive avoidant attachment, they really struggle to even understand their own emotions because of such profound emotional suppression throughout their lives. So sitting there and saying, so how do you feel about it? It doesn't really work for people that really have a hard time even knowing what their feelings are, let alone being vulnerable. But what they do understand, and it does have an impact, is okay, when this happens, do this instead of that. And they do that with repetition. Well, guess what? Not only are they reprogramming the subconscious, but because of their behavioral changes that are sending subconscious messages, they're actually expanding their emotional capacity at the same time, making it progressively easier and easier and easier for them to be vulnerable, to foster intimacy and things like that. So when it comes to attachment styles in particular, there's a lot of science behind it. Focusing on a change in behavior and thought patterns really is largely considered to be the most effective way to change your attachment style. And if you become a securely attached person, well, your odds of getting sucked into another relationship with a narcissist, a sociopath, or anybody with ASPD or anything of the sort, you're it's just so low because that kind of person, when they take the mask off, the securely attached person is say, no thanks, not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like you're a big thing that I'm getting from you that I love is you can't really think your way into a new way of behaving per se. It's more
Right.
of trying to behave your way into a new way of thinking,
Correct.
um, which I love. That's an interesting a bit counterintuitive, so useful. So do you work with, what's the rough breakup? Like, you tend to work with a lot of anxious, or like, what's like what kind of, is there a clustering of, not cluster B, but is there a clustering of different types of
I've had those
people?
too. Um,
Who do you tend to
um,
attract and work with? And a two-part question: who do you tend to attract and work with, and who do you really like or find the most success with?
so when it comes to attracting and working with, it really is a mix across the board. I would say about 30 to 40%. This is really just a rough guesstimate. But I do have stats that I log, but somewhere about 30-40% are dismissive avoidance that are trying to become secure. And then out of the remaining 60-70%, the majority of those people are going to come to me self-identifying as an anxious attacher, anxious preoccupied. But the majority of them are actually fearful avoidant, not anxious attachment. Because most people that think they're anxious attacher are actually fearful avoidant, not anxious. And it's often confused for each other because a fearful avoidant that gets into a relationship with a partner that's emotionally unavailable, such as a dismissive avoidant or a narcissist, is naturally going to find themselves feeling anxious. So they're going to think they're an anxious attacher. Because keep in mind, they do have an anxious preoccupied attachment style, but they also have a dismissive avoidant attachment style. That dismissive avoidant attachment style doesn't get activated in a relationship with a partner that's emotionally unavailable. And I've mentioned the word emotionally unavailable or available a few times. I just want to say real quickly, an emotionally available partner is one that A, can form and foster, that is also willing to form and foster a deep bond, deep connection, deep intimacy and love, and also the ability and the willingness to empathize with their partner, to care about their feelings, share their emotions, the whole thought process of how do I show up for my partner. The unavailable person struggles to empathize, struggles to bond, has walls up. And there's different types of emotional unavailability, but that's an important distinction. Anyway, when a fearful avoidant gets into a relationship with an unavailable partner, their anxious side is activated, so they tend to think that they are anxious attachers. But the kicker is most fearful avoidants, when they get into a relationship with a partner that is emotionally available, like a secure attacher or someone that's maybe just mildly anxious, their avoidance side takes over and they'll sabotage that relationship and push the healthy partner away because they don't have the capacity, at least not until they do some work, to receive real love. They want it, but they think they're anxious until they find that out. So anxious preoccupied is worth a little tiny breakdown here. They generally grew up in stable households, the anxious attacher, but their emotional needs were met inconsistently. And they might have a parent that's maybe a bit narcissistic, but, because narcissistic parents can give and then withhold love. But anxious attachers generally don't experience capital T trauma, rarely lower T trauma, usually at most just a little bit of gaslighting and inconsistency as a kid, but usually not physical or any kind of abuse or anything like that. Relatively stable childhoods. Fearful avoidance, on the other hand, in addition to the inconsistent love, often experience very chaotic childhoods, sometimes even abusive childhoods, physically, emotionally, otherwise. And the core wound of a fearful avoidant is different than that of an anxious attacher. The anxious attacher's core wound is abandonment. Even if they were never actually abandoned by a parent, every time that love was taken away, it was a micro abandonment. So that's their fear. When I get my emotional needs met, it'll be ripped away from me because that's what they learned. With a fearful avoidant, yes, abandonment is a fear, but the number one fear is betrayal. Because in some way, shape, or form, the fearful avoidant had a parent or caretaker that they relied on that betrayed their trust in some way, shape, or form. It could have been through abuse, neglect, or something else. But there was trust that was betrayed. So they learned that love not only equals, ooh, it can be taken away, love equals pain. Love equals betrayal. So if you love somebody, it's inevitable that this person will betray you, that they will cheat on you, lie to you, abuse you, that they'll manipulate you. So fearful avoidants have this inherent distrust and this fear of betrayal, an association of love and pain that an anxious attacher doesn't. So I would say, long story short, out of the remaining 60-70% of my clients, maybe, you know, maybe the vast majority of that I would say would be fearful avoidant. And I'd say out as a whole, maybe only 10%, 20% at most of my clients are actually true anxious attachers.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's always fascinating when people think like people's awareness is always humorous, right? Over the over 50% of people they're an above average think they're an above average driver, which is mathematically impossible, right? So we tend to inflate sometimes, but we also tend to be like, yeah, I mean, granted, to give them benefit of the doubt, some of it might be a bit of a misunderstanding or a misconstruing of these terms, right?
Hmm.
You break it down. So it might not just be like they're delusionally thinking they're anxious when they're really fearful, avoidant. As you're saying, it
Right.
might just be a misunderstanding. But nonetheless, I just find that
Well, they
interesting.
are anxious because
Yeah,
they're
right,
anxious in those relationships.
right. Another thing I meant to ask on the boundaries piece, what sort of a dumb question, but I'm trying to play devil's advocate because I know boundaries are difficult for people. If boundaries are you do this, then I personally will respond differently. What's the difference between a boundary and an ultimatum?
Well, it's really the focus. It's really the focus, the framing. The ultimatum is really focusing on getting the other person to do something or do something differently. The ultimatum is focusing on the other person's behavior. Um, the boundary is really you focusing on what you'll allow and subject yourself to. Because when you're in the mindset of holding boundaries, you're in the mindset of understanding you cannot control another person. You can't. People are going to do what they do. We all have free will. We all have the power to make choices. But boundaries is really taking your power and saying, okay, well, I understand I can't make you do or not do anything, but I can control what I will willingly subject myself to. So, a boundary, for example, an ultimatum would be if you don't see me and spend time with me more often, then I'm out of here. So you must spend more time with me or I'm gone. The boundary would be, well, quality time is really important to me, and I can't allow myself to be in a continued relationship if my partner is not showing me that they're also investing time within me. So my needs aren't being met. If my needs aren't being met, then I need to remove myself. Again, it's really the same behavior, but the focus is not on controlling the other person, it's on making sure that you are showing up for yourself. So it's really where are you putting the spotlight? Are you putting the spotlight on your partner or are you putting it on yourself? With the ultimatum, you're putting the spotlight on your partner. When you're holding a boundary, you're actually putting the spotlight on yourself.
That makes sense. Here's another thing I don't think gets talked about often. If you've had experience with tumultuous relationships and then you've had
Sure have.
present day experience, you've had present day experience, hopefully, more secure emotionally. So I've never seen this talked about, but what's the experience or kind of counterintuitively pitfalls of if you're trying to go from an unhealthy relationship and that's sort of all you know, and you're really like, I'm tired of that, I'm ready for a healthy one, and now you either are looking for a healthy one or you're in a healthy, what's supposed to be a healthy relationship, like what's the acclimation process? What are the challenges? Is someone like what's that, whether it's with them or in how you show up or in how you show up with yourself, like what, it's not as easy as it looks, sadly. So right, so how do what's that like? Because a
Yeah.
lot of people they know, as you get what I'm saying, but like they know how to do a toxic relationship, like they could do that blindfolded, but do they know how
Yes.
to do a healthy
It's
relationship?
hard. So healthy relationships, first of all, they're not technically hard. It's and it's not like you're doing nuclear physics, but it's hard at the same time, especially if you've had a history of toxic relationships and that's all you've known. And it's inevitable that you're not going to be perfect. And as long as you are willing to learn and grow and take accountability, you'll make it through. The healthy relationship is totally worth it, by the way. It's worth all the work in the world. The true closeness, the emotional intimacy, and the bond you can form with a healthy partner is something so fulfilling that I mean, if you never experienced it, it sounds like it's magical, doesn't exist, but I assure you, when you get it, it's worth everything. Now, you'll carry a little PTSD. It's just the reality of it, and you got to be forgiving of yourself and forgiving of your partner, especially if the two of you have had only a history of toxic relationships before your current relationship. And I'll give a personal example from my own personal life, and this is something I do obviously every single day. Guess what? I'm still human. We all have our moments. I was in a long-term relationship, and I don't want to get into the too much of the weeds, but with a woman who is absolutely very narcissistic. I'm confident with the right with the right mental health professional will get diagnosed. It meets the DSM-5 criteria of narcissist. Anyway, it was constant punishing behavior, silent treatments, and things like that. And I was just so used to it, right? Always being on eggshells. And it's been some time. I've done a lot of healing and obviously growth, formed a whole new career. I mean, it's been years, but sometimes that little bit of PTSD can still linger. So my significant other and I refer to her as my fiance because our relationship is at that serious level, but I still got to kind of make it official. So I'm working on that. Anyway, but anyway, we spend a lot of quality time together, and that's a big focus of ours. So we go out to the hot tub, at the end of the night and just have conversations and talk and enjoy each other's company. We do it, 4 or 5 nights a week, spend an hour or two out there. And one night it was getting late, and I had to we're getting ready to go out there, but it's later than we normally go. And I had to go to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom, I come back out, and she's not there. I'm like, what the heck happened? I'm waiting for her. Come to find out, she went upstairs and was in the shower. I'm like, and my immediate mind was I was being punished for taking too long in the bathroom. I was being punished. Instead of just waiting for me, she was sending me a message like going upstairs and going to the shower, and that was it. I was being punished. No hot tub, because that's what it would have been in the past. But it wasn't the case at all. It wasn't the case at all. She just saw the time, thought it was getting late, and figured, oh, you know what? Let's just watch a movie instead, because it was getting late, and there was really no harm intent done whatsoever. And I was like, whoa, I thought you were punishing me. She's like, no, not at all. That was, and I'm like, why didn't you just knock on the bathroom door? She's like, well, that would have been weird. I'm like, so my immediate assumption was, I'm getting punished. I'm getting the silent treatment. She's withdrawing, withholding love because I wasn't fast enough. But no, it wasn't the case at all. At all. So what I mean is little tiny things that you carry from a traumatic relationship can resurface years later because it was drilled into your mind that if you are not perfect, love gets withdrawn from you. So little things like that can show up. But as long as you're willing to say, oh my God, I know where that comes from. This is my past, not anything you did. And to be able to work through that does actually help you heal and move on, as long as you're willing to look at yourself. But if you're not willing to look at yourself, you can sabotage a healthy relationship if you're not willing to say, hey, that was me, that was my issue, my insecurity, my thing from my past, and take ownership. If you can't do that, well, you can have the best partner in the world, but everybody has their breaking point.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving a personal example. There's plenty of people, myself included, that can relate to that, and yeah, right. Like it's a fair thing of like, oh, this is how it made me feel. Like, was that your intention? Oh gosh, no, I was showering because I felt dirty, not because I want to punish you. I wouldn't even conceive of punishing you by the timing of my shower. That'd be like
And that
it's like you, yeah,
she would never do anything to ever punish me. I mean, that's not the person she is. I know that. And I intellectually know that. I emotionally know it too. But in that moment, it was just my emotional brain was like, my subconscious, oh, I know. It was just, I've seen that before, but it wasn't what I really truly saw before. And sometimes your emotional brain will quickly draw connections if you've been in one of those toxic relationships and apply it to a person that would actually never do that to you. So being willing to look at yourself, self-reflect is probably the number one thing. And we've talked about this multiple times here. If you are willing to own your side of the street and truly own it, it's such a difference maker. But if you're not, and if you're constantly trying to look for ways to shift the blame and not take accountability and not take ownership, it doesn't matter what your attachment style is. You're not going to be a good partner.
yeah. One of my favorite phrases is you made me do this. You made me feel this way. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
that's if you've ever heard that before, that's a fun experience. So okay, so I like level one and level 10. So people who are like, all right, how can I get started? Where you can think about five positives, very practical, tactical, five positives for every negative. I was talking about this the other day of like if you write an essay or you do any sort of product, someone gives you feedback, someone grades your essay or whatever, you'll get thousands of positives. But our brain only sees this one little red line, this one like we hyperfixate on the negative, right? So point being is practical, tactical, accessible, free, five positives for every negative. So
Hmm.
I love you offering entry points for people that can give them a starter kit. But I also want to speak to level 10 or level 100 or level 1000 of like, okay, if like what is the amount like what is the if someone's really like I will treat this like I'm going to the military. I'll treat this like the most insane. I'm so tired of this pattern, this pattern of behavior. has ruined my life. Like if someone wants to just go really deep root cause, like then you're not doing five positives for every negative necessarily. Like you're doing that plus what? Like what would be like, this is not the easy pill. This is like if you really want to treat this maximally seriously, like what would you say to that person?
Well, the person that wants to treat it maximally seriously, really, first of all, they need to really deep dive and get in touch with what their boundaries and their core relationship values are. Because without that, they don't have a framework to work off. They need to get a roadmap of themselves for themselves and understand why their boundaries are so important. And needs can be considered a form of a boundary. And for example, any really dial in what works for you. And it takes some time, it takes some effort. Okay, most people don't even know what their needs are or boundaries are. They have basic vague concepts. Oh, I want quality time. Okay, well, what does that look like? But ask yourself why for any individual boundary. So for example, if the boundary is um, no screaming, no name calling, right? If we have a disagreement, we talk. No screaming, no name calling. Why? Because I believe in kind and respectful communication, even when we're mad. Your answer why for any boundary is actually a core relationship value behind that boundary. It's what creates your boundaries. And if you don't know what your boundaries are and what it is that you truly value in a relationship, you're going to be chasing your tail because you're going to have it's hard to have firm boundaries when you're not even 100% sure of what they are. So you got to do the deep work and ask yourself what works for you in a relationship. How do you want your partner to show up? Write them down. Ask yourself why for each one. And then really really reflect on past relationships. What hurt? What felt good? What is a need? What is not? Most people, if you don't know that, you're going to be constantly having a hard time determining what is theirs and what's yours, meaning what is an issue on my side of the street and what is theirs. And then the other part, the tough pill, is going back in your life and figuring out where these wounds came from. What fears do you have? Why do you fear them? The why. What is keeping you afraid? A lot of these deep, deep self-reflective questions, right, to get to the source of it. Okay, I fear abandonment. Why? What's contributing to that? What's keeping me afraid? Getting to the root cause, because when you understand it and you can put a name to it and then you get in touch with your boundaries, you get in touch with what your needs are, it's like adding the pieces to the puzzle. Okay, this is a trigger for me. I'm afraid of holding this boundary, but this is why this is a trigger. And does this make sense? It gives you the chance to work things through. A lot of the stuff is hard to face, even getting in touch with someone's own boundaries. It can be really, really scary for a person because that would mean acknowledging that they even have needs to begin with. And there's some people that are, it's scary to go there. So getting in touch with yourself about what makes you tick, what is it that you want, what is it that you value. Those core relationship values are so incredibly important because they're even more important in a relationship than other core values. Like, oh, we both voted for the same person. Okay, great. But if you both voted for the same candidate, okay, you agree on politics, but you want emotional intimacy. They want distance. You want, kind communication, and they scream and yell. You want consistency, and they're inconsistent. Okay, well, and guess what? You still don't share core relationship values. And it's core relationship values that is really the glue that binds. And if you don't know what yours are, you got to dig deep, do the heavy lifting, and figure out what they are. And guess what? The exercise to do that and to really dig into it, it's not necessarily easy and it's not necessarily fun. And it takes some people days and days of digging and self reflecting to get there. That's hard. It's easier to just stick your head in the sand. But you know what? The reward is worth it. And not and it's not about me, and I'm not trying to brag, but I'm living it firsthand. You know, it's before this version of Coach Ryan, there was a version that didn't know stuff and that was going through unhealthy relationships, but now done the work and got the best relationship with the love of my life. And I didn't get here by accident. And I've seen many, many people go down the similar path. Once they choose to really do that work, boy, does it pay off.
So kind of next part of that of like, okay, that like you said, it's not going to be easy. I need guidance. So if I'm looking for guidance and I'm looking for a facilitator, a therapist, a coach, a practitioner, or someone who can help me do this, what, how would you advise someone to assess, what are you looking for? Are you looking for someone who is going to validate my emotion? Like what do you think people should look for to properly assess who can help them regardless of the label, right? Regardless of the label being coach,
Yeah.
therapist, practitioner, you know, like whoever it is, it's like I want help. I can't do this alone. I don't want to do this alone. I either can't or don't want to do this alone. How do I properly assess what I'm looking like? Who can help me with this? What is it? Qualities? Is it traits? Is it methodologies? Like, how do you know what to look for?
Well, I mean, obviously, it really depends on what exactly you're looking to address. But if you're looking to address an attachment style issue, you're going to want somebody that, in general, and I mean, keep in mind, I'm not saying, it's not one size fits all for everybody, but in general, a more CBT approach is going to be more helpful right from the start. Cognitive behavioral therapy, essentially focusing on behavioral and thought patterns. It's just tends to be more effective with attachment. But there's other types of, therapeutic approaches that can work with attachment too, and I'm not knocking them. But that right off the gate. But number two, you want to work with somebody who does have empathy, a person that is not shaming, right? Because even though this is, people, mental health and wellness and all that, there's still coaches and even therapists out there that sometimes do take a shaming approach. And that is completely the opposite direction because shaming is never healthy. Someone that's empathetic, no shaming, but is going to be honest with you, meaning not always tell you the things that you want to hear, but things that you need to hear. And, I sometimes people will go to a coach or will shop multiple coaches looking for someone to give them the magic formula to get their ex back, right? But then the coach will find out, okay, this ex is abusive, emotionally abusive, toxic, and say, listen, what you're telling me here is emotional abuse, and I think you'd be best served focusing on how to heal, hold boundaries, so you never repeat this, so you don't subject yourself to this again, rather than giving this person the tools, aka the different games to play to manipulate the other person to coming back. So, do you want someone that's just going to validate you but give you nothing productive, or do you want someone that's going to be honest even when it's honesty that isn't fun to hear? So it's to come. You want to find someone that has the obviously the knowledge, but the willingness to be empathetic and understanding, but still give you actual feedback and not just tell you what you want to hear. And generally, coupled with the CBT approach for attachment, that's what I believe is the most effective. There's a lot of good coaches out there. There's a lot of good therapists out there, but there's also a lot of bad ones too.
Yeah. Well, we can agree on that. Ryan, anything else that I didn't ask you? Anything else you want to share before you can wrap up with your, we'll put links and all that kind of stuff in the show notes and whatever.
Um, you know, um, I think we really covered a lot of good stuff, but one message I just want to reinforce out there is one, shame never productive. So healing that internal shame wound and recognizing your own self-worth is key because the more shame you have, the harder it is to show up in a healthy relationship. And shame is a toxic emotion. And the other thing, love should not have to be earned, and you should never have to try to earn it from somebody, chase them to prove your worth. It starts by healing that shame and recognizing your own worth. Because if you do that and you truly do that, you'll never feel the need to go earn love from somebody who probably doesn't even have the capacity to give it themselves. So, accountability from within is the most healing thing. You can't look to somebody else to heal you. You have to be willing to do it yourself. And when we talk about coaching, therapy, any of that kind of stuff, learning boundaries, focus of boundaries on yourself, it's really ultimately about you showing up for you. If you're looking to find a relationship that, oh, I'll find a partner that will heal me, you're having the wrong approach because you have to take charge. You have to take agency, heal yourself, heal that shame, show up for yourself, learn those skills. Because, like you said, nobody can make you heal. No one can make you feel anything. No one can make you do anything.
I love it. Well, this was a lot of fun. Definitely appreciate your time. Uh,
Appreciate you as well.
where can people? There'll be links, but for the audio version of your life experience here, where do you want to send people? Any your socials, website, anything you want to
They can
share?
go to my web. They can go to my website, www.coachryan, RYAN, LLC.com. www.coachryanllc.com. That's my website, and you can find me as Coach Ryan on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. There might be a couple imposters out there, but just look for the follower count. I'm the one with the larger count.
Just look for the chief daddy officer. All right. Well, Ryan, this was a blast.
Likewise.
We'll pause it here, maybe around to another time. But thanks for your time.
Appreciate you. Thank you very much.